Tonight on Legislative Review. A look at the week ahead. Plus, Senate budget writers released their proposed operating budget. And House Democrats follow suit. From Olympia, this is Legislative Review. Welcome to Legislative Review, your source for daily highlights in the state legislature. I'm Angela Nolasco.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
Welcome to Week 11 of the 2025 legislative session. The 15-week session is two-thirds done, with a scheduled adjournment of Sunday, April 27th. The big news at the Capitol this week, the state budget. Since the start of session, a big question for lawmakers has been how to fill a multi-billion-dollar gap in the state's operating budget for the next two-year budget cycle. This week, we get a detailed look at how majority Democrats in the Senate and House of Representatives are proposing to craft the state budget. Besides the operating budget, state transportation budgets are also being rolled out this week, paying for everything from roads to transit to ferries. Monday, several press conferences are being held to roll out budgets and take questions from the media. Budgets are scheduled to have public hearings in House and Senate fiscal committees on Tuesday afternoon and be voted on by those same committees Thursday afternoon, followed by a likely floor debate over the Senate budget on Saturday. But it's not all budget this week. Policy committees continue to meet as those committees face an April 2nd deadline to hear and vote on bills that have passed the opposite chamber. Facing an estimated $15 billion budget deficit over the next 4 years, the legislative session heads toward a crucial budget decision. Senate budget leaders gathered at a press conference Monday morning to release their proposed operating budget for the next biennium. The $78.5 billion budget relies on the state's rainy day fund, with a projected spending increase of $5.4 billion from the current biennial budget, leaving $7.6 billion in total reserves. Among the budget's priorities, Senator June Robinson, chair of the Ways and Means Committee, said were K-12 education, housing, healthcare, food assistance, and difficult but necessary reductions in spending.
We work to distribute the cuts thoughtfully across the budget, across all areas, and aim to limit the harm and preserve critical services whenever possible. It was really important that we safeguard key supports that people need, like access to health care, housing, and food assistance.
Those reductions will affect the Fair Start for Kids Act, a $1.1 billion investment to make childcare and early learning less costly, capping copays through Working Connections childcare.
Families who use Working Connections childcare, some of them will need to pay more in copays as a result of this. Some families who would have gained eligibility to Working Connections childcare will need to wait for that. And our early learning program, the state program ECAP, is not an entitlement at this time as it was intended to be.
A point which Vice Chair Noel Frame also spoke to.
We passed bills off the floor that helped to implement these reductions, particularly on childcare, and we had some Republican votes on those bills.
Senate Democrats proposed roughly $11 billion for maintenance level increases in the next 4 years. That's $3.1 billion for K-12 education, $2.2 billion for the Department of Social and Health Services, $1.2 billion in raises for public workers, and $2.5 billion for the Department of Children, Youth and Families. The proposal includes several key taxes aimed at addressing the state's budget shortfall, with a focus on the wealthiest individuals and corporations contributing more. To help working families, a proposed half-point sales tax reduction, lowering the sales tax rate from 6.5% to 6%. It's expected to cost the state $1.3 billion per year, but aims to provide relief to households struggling with the rising cost of living.
We're working to make our upside-down tax code more equitable by cutting the sales tax, putting money back into the hands of working and middle-class Washingtonians, and providing meaningful property tax relief for low-income seniors and veterans with disabilities.
The proposal seeks to rebalance the tax burden by asking the wealthiest to pay their fair share. Senate budget writers say this is necessary to address Washington's regressive tax system, which disproportionately impacts low and middle-income families.
Our proposal asks our state's wealthiest individuals and largest corporations to contribute their fair share, ensuring those who benefit the most from our economy maintain the services that we all rely on.
Among the taxes proposed is a financial intangibles tax, targeting individuals with assets over $50 million. This tax will charge $10 for every $1,000 of stocks, bonds, and mutual funds held by high net worth individuals. It's expected to raise about $4 billion per year starting in 2027 and will primarily fund public schools and support special education. The proposal also removes the cap on property tax growth for public schools, cities, and counties, allowing tax increases to reflect population growth and inflation. This change could generate an additional $779 million over 4 years, supporting public safety and criminal justice.
BSA rainy day fund ending fund balance, although it is low, admittedly, in fiscal year 26, by the end of fiscal year 27, it's back to $2 billion, and by fiscal year 29, it's at $3 billion, and by the end of fiscal year 29, we show 17.5% of reserves of our budget as reserves. So it does go low, but it quickly builds back to a very strong point.
The full presser is available on tvw.org.
Our approach has been simple. Do the least amount of harm and protect food, shelter, and health as best we can.
House Democrats also unveiled their proposed operating budget, confirming a recommended delay in the Working Connections childcare eligibility, at least until 2029, which, along with the previously mentioned ECAP delay, would result in savings of over $734 million over 4 years. The $77.8 billion budget proposes $117 million in new funding for shelters, $93 million for emergency food assistance, and $50 million in state grants for public safety. Similar to Senate Democrats, House Democrats are also proposing a financial intangible assets tax, $8 to every $1,000 of assessed value on stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, with the first $50 million exempt from the tax.
This will best ensure tax fairness. This tax will be paid by around 4,300 wealthy Washingtonians and will generate approximately $2 billion a year beginning in the fiscal year 2027.
And to fund K-12 education, a 1% cap on property tax growth based on inflation and population capped at 3%, and a 1% business and occupation tax surcharge on businesses with taxable income over $250 million. Some highlights of the budget include continued funding for Apple Health for immigrants, $20 million for nursing home rates, $6 million for youth homelessness diversion, and $45 million to fund school meals.
We protect our recent investments in school meals because we know that hungry kids can't learn. We increased funding and established pilot programs for inclusionary practices for special education and helping students get the support they need to be successful and to thrive.
The budget also allocates $133 million for food security and assistance, $50 million for wildfire response, $50 million for local law enforcement grants, and $29 million to support crime victims.
We continue our investments in public safety, funding the Criminal Justice Training Commission, the Basic Law Enforcement Academy, the Office of Public Defense, the Office of Civil Legal Aid, and adding $50 million in grants to help local communities invest in public safety, law enforcement, substance use disorder, and more.
It also proposes $2.2 million for the Washington State University Native Scholarship Program and no tuition fee increases for higher education. And for the Department of Corrections staff support, a $53 million funding, as well as $40 million for immigrant, refugee, and new arrivals to the state. Majority Democrats are now faced with the task of balancing the budget before the adjournment of session on April 27th. Both pressers are available to watch in full online via tvw.org. That's it for today's highlights on the state legislature. Stay up to date by watching Legislative Review every night at 8 and 11 and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We'll see you then.